Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the fan brushing over my damp skin. I had just stepped out of the shower, the scent of my vanilla body lotion still clinging to the air. The air was cool, but my heartbeat wasn't. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in the rhythm of the fan blades when I heard it, the faint sound of the door creaking open. I didn't move. For a moment, I thought it was just the wind. But then, I felt it, a shift in the air, the weight of someone's gaze. Slowly, I turned my head. He was there. Standing in the doorway like he had every reason to be. His expression was calm, unreadable, but his eyes, they didn't waver. He walked in quietly, his steps steady, deliberate. My throat went dry as he came closer and sat beside me, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. The distance between us disappeared until I could feel the warmth of his body mingling with the cool breeze that kissed my skin. I wanted to speak, to ask him why he was here, but the words tangled in my throat. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was electric. His fingers brushed lightly against the blanket near my leg, not touching, but close enough to make my pulse stumble. My breath caught when he looked at me, his gaze soft but heavy, like he was seeing every secret I was trying to hide. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, he leaned in just a little, not enough to cross the line, but enough for me to feel the heat radiating from him. My chest tightened. Every nerve felt alive. I could smell his familiar cologne, the one that always lingered long after he was gone. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The air between us said everything. My heart raced, my skin tingled, and all I could do was stare back at him, caught between wanting him to leave and not wanting him to move at all. And just when I thought I could breathe again, he reached out, slowly, his fingers tracing the edge of the sheet beside me, and whispered something that made my breath hitch completely. But before he could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. The moment froze in that quiet, charged air, his hand still hovering over the edge of the sheet, mine gripping the blanket just a little tighter. The footsteps outside faded, leaving only the two of us, suspended between what we were and what we could never admit. He finally looked away, exhaling softly, like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. "You always leave the door unlocked," he murmured, his voice low, half a scold, half a confession. I wanted to tell him I did it on purpose, that maybe I wanted him to walk in. But the truth stayed buried beneath my pulse. We weren't strangers. Not anymore. But we weren't supposed to be this close either. There was a line we drew months ago, unspoken, fragile, built out of guilt and restraint. He had someone waiting for him, and I had sworn I would never fall for anyone who couldn't stay. But here we were again. I remembered the first time he came to me, drenched from the rain, frustrated, lost in more ways than one. I had offered him warmth, tea, silence. Somehow, silence had become our language. In that quiet, we found something deeper, the kind of comfort that scares you because it feels like home. Now, every visit felt like a test. Every look, a confession we weren't ready to speak. He glanced at me again, eyes softer now, searching. "You've been avoiding me," he said. I smiled faintly. "Maybe you've been too close." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, but behind it was something raw. "You think I don't notice how you pull away every time I walk in," he said, voice almost trembling. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to protect whatever this was by pretending it didn't exist. But he wasn't wrong. I did pull away, not because I didn't want him, but because I did. Too much. "I don't want to make things harder," I whispered, my gaze falling to the floor. He shifted closer, the bed creaking softly. "You already have." The words hit harder than I expected. I looked up and saw something in his eyes, not anger, not regret, but longing. The kind that leaves a mark. He brushed his fingers against my hand, barely touching, but enough to send a spark through every part of me that tried to stay still. I felt my breath quicken, the world narrowing to the space between us. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, as if echoing the storm we were both trying to quiet. I could feel everything we weren't saying pressing against the silence, years of restraint, guilt, and a pull that neither of us could escape. Then he said softly, "You always act like you don't feel it too." And before I could answer, he stood up, walked toward the door, and paused. Without turning around, he said, "You don't have to pretend anymore." The door closed quietly, leaving me staring into the stillness, my heart aching between relief and regret. The next day felt heavier than usual. Every sound, every movement in the house seemed sharper, like my senses were tuned to his absence. I tried to distract myself with little things, folding clothes, watering the plants, staring too long at nothing. But the memory of last night replayed in fragments, his voice, his eyes, the way he said, "You don't have to pretend anymore." By evening, I heard the familiar hum of his motorcycle outside. My heartbeat skipped. He wasn't supposed to come back, not after what happened. I stood frozen near the window, watching as he got off, removing his jacket, the night breeze ruffling his hair. There was something different about his expression, colder, harder, but his eyes still carried the pull I couldn't shake off. When he entered the house, our eyes met, and the silence was deafening. He didn't say hello. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, long enough for the air to grow thick between us. "You didn't lock the door again," he said quietly, stepping closer. "I didn't think you'd come," I replied, trying to sound steady. He laughed softly, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. Maybe I shouldn't have. But he didn't stop moving forward. Each step he took felt deliberate, like he was testing how far I'd let him go. My back brushed against the wall before I realized I'd been retreating. "Why do you keep doing this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Doing what?" he said, his tone low, teasing, almost dangerous. "Coming back when you know you shouldn't." He tilted his head, his gaze tracing my face, my lips, then back to my eyes. "Maybe I like what I shouldn't," he said softly. My chest tightened. Every part of me screamed to stay still, but my heart betrayed me, racing fast enough to give me away. His nearness was intoxicating, close enough for me to feel his breath against my skin. Then he said something that sent a shiver through me. "Does he make you feel the way I do?" I froze. The question cut deeper than it should. Jealousy, quiet but sharp, flickered in his tone. I could see it in his eyes, the same mix of want and resentment that neither of us dared name. Before I could answer, thunder cracked outside, and he stepped back, just slightly, leaving me trembling, suspended between guilt and desire. The rain came down in sheets that night, flooding the porch and silencing the world outside. The power flickered once, twice, then vanished, leaving only candlelight dancing across the walls. I was alone in the living room, trying not to think about him, when I heard it, 3 soft knocks on the door. My heart knew before my mind did. When I opened it, he stood there drenched, breathless, and looking at me like I was the only safe thing in the storm. Water dripped from his hair, his shirt clinging to his chest, the faint rise and fall of his breath visible in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though I stepped aside anyway. "I had to see you," he said simply, voice rough, eyes burning with something I couldn't name. The silence stretched again, that familiar, unbearable pull. He watched as I moved closer, my hand brushing his arm, cold and soaked through. I grabbed a towel, pretending composure, but when my fingers touched his skin, everything inside me unraveled. He caught my wrist, gently, but firmly, and for a heartbeat, we just stood there, the storm echoing our pulse. "Every time I walk away," he said, his voice low, trembling with restraint, "you pull me back without saying a word." I swallowed hard, the air too thick, the space between us too small. And every time you come back, I whispered, you make it harder to let go. The candlelight flickered, shadows dancing across his face. His hand moved to my cheek, his thumb brushing away a drop of rain, or maybe it was a tear. I didn't know anymore. He leaned closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath, the electricity between us tightening like a drawn string. Everything in me screamed to step back, but I didn't. Outside, thunder shook the windows. Inside, the silence broke with a single word from him, soft, vulnerable, real. Tell me to stop. But I couldn't. My lips parted, no sound coming out. The wind howled, the candlelight wavered, and before anything could happen, the front door suddenly burst open behind him. Someone was there. The door slammed open with a sharp crack, wind and rain sweeping into the room like a warning. The candle flickered violently, and in the doorway stood her. His fiancée. For a second, none of us moved. The storm roared outside, but the silence inside was louder. I could see the disbelief on her face, her eyes darting between us, him standing too close, my trembling hands clutching the edge of the towel, the soft glow of the candlelight painting a picture she didn't need explained. He stepped back instantly, guilt flashing across his face. It's not what it looks like, he said, the oldest, weakest line anyone could use. Her lips trembled, but her eyes hardened. Then tell me what it is, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. I wanted to speak, to defend him, to say something that would ease the pain painted across her face, but I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew it was exactly what it looked like. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing through the window. She took a step inside, her soaked hair clinging to her skin. You promised me, she whispered. You said she meant nothing. He flinched, his jaw tightening. I didn't come here to, then why are you here, she snapped, the words cutting through the air like thunder. He looked at me then, his eyes full of 1,000 things he couldn't say aloud, guilt, longing, confusion. And in that look, everything shattered. Because she saw it too. The truth. The quiet, painful truth that had been hiding behind every it's nothing and every I'll stay away. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, it was never nothing. Her voice cracked on the last word, and it hit me like a physical blow. I realized I wasn't the only one caught in the middle of something we couldn't control. He had been torn between what was right and what felt real, and in doing so, he had destroyed both. He reached for her, but she pulled away, her face breaking as she whispered, I can't even hate you for it. That's the worst part. Then she turned and walked out into the storm without looking back. The door closed behind her, the sound echoing like a final heartbeat. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the floor, rainwater pooling around his shoes. When he finally looked up, his eyes met mine, not with desire this time, but devastation. This isn't what I wanted, he said quietly. But maybe, it's what I needed to see. I felt the weight of his words, the truth of them, sink into the silence between us. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside, everything had already broken. The storm passed, but its echo stayed behind, in the walls, in the air, and between us. The house was quiet again, too quiet, except for the faint dripping from the roof and the low hum of my heartbeat. He stood near the window, staring out into the night where she had vanished. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set like he was holding himself together by sheer will. I wanted to say something, to reach out, to fix what couldn't be fixed, but the silence between us was heavy with everything that had already been said. Finally, he turned toward me. His face was pale, tired, his eyes red from holding back more than tears. Do you know what you've done to me? He asked, his voice cracking under the weight of it all. The question hit me like a confession and an accusation at once. I wanted to say it wasn't just me, that he had walked through the same door, taken the same steps, made the same choices. But the truth was, I had let him. I never meant for it to go this far, I said quietly. I tried to stop, he laughed softly, bitterly. No, you didn't. Neither of us did. His honesty stung more than any blame could. I felt the tears threaten again, but I refused to let them fall. Then what do you want me to say? I whispered. That I'm sorry? That I wish I could undo everything? He took a step closer, his voice lowering. No. I just want the truth. The truth. The one thing we'd both been running from. I love you, I said finally, the words trembling as they left my lips. And I hate that I do. He closed his eyes, and for a second, the pain in his face softened, not from relief, but from recognition. He understood, because he felt it too. I can't fix this, he said after a long pause. She doesn't deserve what I did. And you don't deserve what comes next. What comes next? I asked, my chest tightening. He looked at me, really looked, with a kind of sadness that broke me completely. Goodbye. And then he left. No shouting, no final touch. Just the sound of the door closing for the last time. I stood there, staring at the empty space where he had been. The storm had ended, but the air still smelled of rain and regret. I sank to the floor, finally letting the tears fall. Outside, dawn began to creep through the window, casting a soft glow across the room. The light felt cruel in its gentleness, a reminder that life moves on, even when hearts don't. The weeks that followed were quiet, too quiet at first. Days blurred together like soft brushstrokes on fading memory. I tried to go on with life, convincing myself that what happened was something I had to bury, not relive. But every time it rained, I found myself standing by the same window, listening for a sound that never came, the hum of his motorcycle, the voice that once filled this silence. Then, one evening, just as the sun began to sink behind the clouds, I heard it again, that familiar, steady hum echoing up the driveway. My heart stopped. I froze in place, torn between running to the door and pretending I hadn't heard a thing. But I didn't have to move. The door opened, and there he was, standing in the fading light, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand, his eyes tired but soft. I didn't think you'd come back, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly, stepping closer. I didn't think I would either, until I realized leaving you didn't fix anything. I felt the tears well up again, but this time they didn't hurt. He placed the flowers on the table and took a deep breath. I told her everything, he said. All of it. She deserved the truth. We both did. I looked at him, waiting for what came next. And? She left, he said simply, eyes glistening. But before she did, she said something I'll never forget, if you love her, then don't waste it. His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw peace instead of conflict in his eyes. He stepped closer until he was right in front of me. The space between us, once filled with guilt and hesitation, now felt lighter, like something had finally shifted. I don't know where we go from here, I said softly, but I don't want to pretend anymore. He reached for my hand, his touch gentle, grounding. Then we don't, he whispered. We start over, honestly this time. The air between us was still, warm, and full of quiet relief. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his thumb lingering on my cheek. There was no rush, no storm, no more pretending. Just us, two people who had broken, healed, and somehow found their way back to the same place. Outside, the rain began to fall again, but softly now, like a blessing, not a curse. He pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. This time, he said with a quiet smile, I'm not leaving.